Welcome back to the Means Report. My thanks to Congressman Rick Allen for joining us. And now let's focus on the home stretch of the presidential campaign on the Democratic side of the ticket. Nexstar, the parent company of WJBF News Channel 6, recently caught up with a top advisor, David Plouffe, to the Kamala Harris campaign. Mr. Plouffe also worked extensively with the Obama campaign, and now he's trying to help the vice president and her team ascend to the top office in the nation. Our interview now with David Plouffe.
Barack Obama, your former boss, is going to speak tonight, and Kamala Harris is also going to be campaigning. Interesting strategy there to, get her back out on the trail while also Obama speaking.
Well, there's only 77 days, so any day you can be in a battleground state, you need to seize that opportunity. So obviously there'll be a lot of attention tonight on both Obama speaking, and I'm as interested in the people who aren't going to watch this convention tonight, but who see it on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok later tonight and tomorrow. And I think it's important. I think both Obamas will deliver some lines and material that will reach those folks. But for Kamala Harris then to be in Wisconsin, critical state, trying to reach those voters is key. So that's the thing. A convention happens, but the rest of the campaign, to your point, doesn't stop. The organizing continues. You get your principles out there. The advertising continues. So in some respects, as an operative, the convention can be challenging because so much of your attention is focused on that. But in the 7 states that are going to decide this election, you really got to keep focused on, every hour, how are you maximizing your chances to win.
Now, it's interesting that you bring up those 7 states because just this morning, you said that the Sun Belt is back in play. Have you all really, yes, we have this focus on these core states, but have you actually begun to expand out beyond that to try and make it an even bigger win?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the Sun Belt is back in play. We're advertising in those states at a heavy rate. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will be campaigning in those states, have been, will continue to be. Surrogates will be in those states. So that's important because you're trying to get to 270 electoral votes. And if you have no margin for error, you basically have to make every shot. That's not a great place to be. Michael Jordan, we're in the United Center, will be the first one to tell you miss a lot of the shots. So we want to win all those states, and I think we can. But you want a bunch of different pathways to 270. And the race really changed overnight in that way with Kamala Harris's entry. I think prior to Joe Biden's, really brave and selfless decision, we really were down to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now those other states are back in play. You see the Trump campaign starting to dramatically spend more money in those states, so they see it too. I mean, there's no spin involved when you see where you're sending your candidate and where you're spending your money. And I think both campaigns now agree. And listen, prior to Kamala Harris getting in the race, Donald Trump and his campaign were talking about, we're going to go win Minnesota and New Hampshire and New Mexico. I mean, hell, Trump would even talk about New Jersey and New York. I think those days are over. Right. We're back to the 7 and the very important congressional district of Nebraska, the second one, which in some scenarios is the 270th electoral vote.
Okay, so I can't think of a better person. No one's really been able to explain it in a way than you to try to explain it. Prior to Kamala Harris being at the top of the ticket, polling showed that she was an unpopular figure, unpopular vice president. And that was the trepidation of the Democratic Party when there was the scuttlebutt, should Joe remain at the top of the ticket? Should we have this open primary system? That changed overnight. Why was there all of this excitement so quickly when it wasn't there in the past?
Well, ultimately, Joe Biden had to make the decision. His was the only voice that really mattered. And I think he's been an incredible president and made really a historically unusual decision to give up power. But the polls that suggested that no other candidate would do better didn't capture the dynamic of the race, which is, with all due respect to him, there was a lot of voters not excited about the Trump-Biden rematch.
Right, 2 old guys.
So Trump wasn't going anywhere, and it's almost like a breath of fresh air. And the other thing I'd say is she has done well in the first few weeks. And the one thing is, you only have to be an amateur student of American political history to say, look at all the people, Ron DeSantis being the latest example, that people were convinced would walk into the White House. And the political graveyard is littered with people who get chewed up because, you know what, the spotlight is so glaring. And she's filled the stage. And so I think the change was a big part of it. And then I think she's met the moment. And I think that's why things have changed. And it's still going to be a really close race. I mean, Donald Trump's going to get 47, 48% of the vote in all these states. In some cases, he's a little closer to 49 than I'd like. So we got our work cut out for us. As Kamala Harris said a couple days to the reporters traveling with her, she's still the underdog, and that's the way we're approaching this. But we got a fighting shot in all these states, because that's what it comes down to, is when you look at the electorate, It's just basic math. How many people do you expect to vote? How many votes do you think third parties might get? Therefore, how many votes do you need?
Right.
And you back down from that. And in all 7 of those states, we can credibly say we have a pathway to winning. Because what I don't believe you can do in politics is say, well, we don't think we can win, but we want to spend money there to convince the news media it's in play. Like, that's totally malpractice.
Well, that's a waste of.
Yeah, you got to be in it.
Yeah, right. It's
You're either
waste, right.
all in or all
Right.
out. And I think in these 7 states, we're all in.
Is it, I mean, and you're brought in to, come in and be a force in this campaign, and maybe you might disagree with this, but sort of push the Biden folks aside. Are you guys unified? Is there?
It's a great, no, we're completely. So listen, Jen O'Malley Dillon was the campaign chair, and she ran Joe Biden's race in 2020. So, she worked for Barack Obama, she worked for Joe Biden, now she's leading Kamala Harris's campaign. So we're unified. Listen, I think if you look at 2020, the party was incredibly unified under difficult circumstances during COVID to elect Joe Biden. So I think that Joe Biden made a decision which is, I've worked in the White House, spent a lot of time in the Situation Room in the Oval Office. So what a president does day in and day out, they make tough decisions, they talk to world leaders, they listen to their advisors. You're generally choosing between bad and worse options. You're dealing with Congress. All that stuff he's doing as well today as he did when he was VP. There's a performance aspect to it, which he said, I don't debate as well as I used to. I don't speak as well as I used to. And whether we like it or not, that's an important part of the job. And I think that's where I think the concern was. And so the unity here is it's twofold. One is we saw the damage, and from our point of view, that Trump did in the first term. And what's different this time is now he's got a plan. Project 2025 is a blueprint for what he wants to do. He's also the oldest nominee ever to seek the office, which raises the question, if something were to happen to him, J.D. Vance is the president, how many people really want that? I think that'll be a question in this campaign. But then it's excitement for Kamala Harris because you see that kind of, like I went to the Pennsylvania delegation breakfast here today. Been to a lot of delegation breakfasts through my career.
I bet.
The energy was there, right? People coming up to me, the governor, mayors, county council people, activists saying, what can we do? And that energy, and part of it's the time. People realize we don't have a lot of time, but people are super excited. And so I think that's where some of the unity comes in, where the energy comes in. But at the end of the day, yeah, you've got people who've worked for Clinton, for Biden, for Harris. Hell, some people go back to Carter, okay? But at the end of the day, we're committed to electing a Democratic president and denying Trump a second term. But the excitement about Kamala Harris is exciting to political professionals. That's why we all got into business. Like when half the people who are involved in the campaign now, who in the last 3 weeks, more than half, who've given money or volunteer, have never done so in politics. That is similar to Obama. That fueled us in 08, which is all these people came out of the woodwork, young, middle-aged, old, Republicans, Independents, Democrats, and there's energy to that. Because what I've always found in a community, when someone who's never been involved in politics gets involved, that's interesting to their neighbors, their family. Say, oh, I never thought you cared. Why? What are you doing? And they can say, well, here's why. So that's powerful in a way that is hard to capture properly. But you think about a race that could come down to a vote or two per precinct in 7 states. You have that kind of energy at the community level, it makes a big, big difference.
Yeah. One last question for you before we have to let you go. And I think it's important to note, too, that energy makes a difference, but it's the votes on Election Day that make the actual difference. Right. The question, though, is has Kamala Harris avoided the interviews, the press conferences, because the campaign is fearful of a gaffe that would derail that energy that has been carrying her to this point?
No, absolutely not. First of all, she's been taking questions from the reporters on the road. She said publicly she'll do a sit-down interview of some sort by the end of the month. That's coming up close. A presidential campaign is all sorts of things. So there's speeches like she's going to give Thursday night. There's rallies like she's doing in Wisconsin. You go to diners and bowling alleys and bars and talk to voters. You do interviews. You talk to influencers these days on Instagram and YouTube.
This is the first time we've seen a convention with an influencer.
That's how so many people get in. Listen, the data is clear. I'm a data person.
And from 08, you guys deployed Facebook.
Yes, that was old school, right?
Right.
Now it's like TikTok. I mean, TikTok and YouTube are such powerful platforms in our society and in our politics in this election. So by the end of the campaign, she will have done all of those things, right? So no, at the end of the day, I think Trump has done great damage, though, in the press conferences he's done, because he's not driving a message. He's coming across as sort of old and angry. And at the end of the day, I'm convinced there's more than 50% of the people in every battleground state who, all things being considered, don't want a return of Trump. It's our job to tap into that. And to the point about its votes, that's at the end of the day, energy, polls, none of it matters.
Yep.
Unless it materializes into cold, hard votes. You're absolutely right about that. And that's why campaign professionals are never confident in any race they work in, or they shouldn't be involved in politics. Because until you start seeing actual vote on election day at the precinct level, things can go awry. So you got to stay with it.
That sounds like you're in a constant state of discomfort then.
Well, I think you need to be, right? We're here in the United Center, man. Like Michael Jordan, he'd go into halftime. If they were up by 6 or 7, he'd be upset they weren't up 10 and 12. Man, if you believe in something you're trying to win, you got to drive.
So there you go. How would you like to have an impact on future editions of the Means Report and help us get more great guests like today? We'll show you when we come back.